Turning back to our top story tonight, a case that has drawn attention from around the world in the hands of the jury now. Closing arguments wrapped up this afternoon, sending the case to 12 jurors who will have to decide if former police officer Derek Chauvin is guilty of murder or manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Protests tonight outside the courthouse in downtown Minneapolis, and the city and cities across the country are now bracing for a verdict in this case. Joining me now is Lee Merritt. He is a federal civil rights attorney and co-counsel representing the Floyd family. Thank you for your time tonight here on NewsNation Prime.
Thank you for having me.
I know that you are in contact and in close touch with the Floyd family. Give us an idea of their state of mind right now.
Well, this is a very tense time for all families when the jury is out deliberating. They're paying attention to every note that comes from the jury. They're reading into how long the deliberation takes place, and they're on pins and needles.
We have all watched this case unfold in the courtroom and in the video that everyone has witnessed to this point of the death of George Floyd. The prosecution argues that the former officer had to know George Floyd's life was in danger. The defense, however, says Chauvin acted reasonably and that George Floyd died of an underlying heart condition and illegal drug use. Give us your thoughts and your takeaways from the trial and also closing arguments today.
Well, I think the Attorney General's office, the prosecutors, they did an excellent job laying out their case. I thought their medical experts were phenomenal. There were hiccups like there are hiccups in all cases, but they were able to recover from them. And Mr. Nelson, the attorney for Mr. Chauvin, I think he did the best that he could given the facts of the case. This is a very steep uphill battle for someone who had to prove that Derek Chauvin's behaviors was reasonable for the length of the police encounter. I noticed in closing that Mr. Nelson spent a lot of time talking about the things leading up to the kneeling on the neck, the passive resistance that took place, the fact that Mr. Floyd appeared not to want to enter the car, discussing that he was claustrophobic. But there was very little discussed in that closing. And I think this will really hang on the attention of the jurors. There was very little discussed about the closing about why Mr. Chauvin continued to kneel on George Floyd's neck after he had stopped resisting, after he had stopped breathing, after there was no longer a pulse, when the paramedics arrived. And I think the prosecutors, again, really hammered that point home. And hopefully, those will be the considerations of the jury.
Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. What do you expect from this jury?
Well, if I were to guess, I would think that the case was made for third-degree murder. This was the point in the case that actually had to go up in appeals, very rare, prior to the trial starting. I think given the history in Minnesota, in the jury instructions that this jury were given, that they've received more than enough evidence to convict on third-degree murder. And of course, that's if they convict at all. Juries are very unpredictable. And sometimes, it could be the exhaust pipe or the carbon monoxide or something that takes just that one juror, because one juror is all it takes, down a different road.
You're right about that. I'd like to get your perspective on an issue that was raised today by the defense attorney for for Derek Chauvin. He asked the judge to dismiss the case because of comments that were made by Representative Maxine Waters, a Democratic congresswoman from California. Over the weekend, she urged protesters in Minneapolis to get more confrontational if Chauvin is not convicted. The judge today denied that request, did say the comments, however, may have given the defense something on appeal and could result in this trial essentially being overturned at some point. Your thoughts on that back and forth today and those comments?
Well, it's something that, as the judge said, can be argued. I don't think it's a very strong argument. Understanding that Congresswoman Congresswoman Maxine Waters were encouraging lawful citizens to continue to lawfully protest, be confrontational, be disruptive, and that is a huge part of the American story. If our legal system is supposed to hold up and play out the will of the people, then the people have a responsibility to make sure that policymakers, elected officials, and other citizens know that living in the deadliest police culture in the modern world, a police culture in America that has gone on to kill 3 people a day since the murder of George Floyd, that is unacceptable, and that protests will continue, and as people will continue to express their lack of consent and dissent specifically to the state of American policing.
There are rising calls for justice and accountability, and I know that the Floyd family is watching as well as the verdict comes down. What are your concerns right now about potential rioting and violence in the city of Minneapolis when word comes down of a verdict from the jury? And what is not only yours, but also the family's message to people out on the streets in Minneapolis and in cities across the country tonight?
Well, I have to commend the city of Minneapolis specifically, the organizing community. I spent some time out there last week organizing both for the family of George Floyd and Daunte Wright. As a civil rights attorney, we left the courtroom and reminded people how the process of protesting is supposed to take place. Legal observers are present, ensuring that protesters are operating within their rights and that their rights are being protected from law enforcement. I like Maxine Waters, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, continue to encourage protesters to show up into the streets, but to do so peacefully and productively, to be specific with their demands, to demand actionable items, and to continue to fight to change this country. The state that it's in right now is not okay, and I think it's our American responsibility to continue to protest and resist.
Lee Merritt, federal civil rights attorney and co-counsel representing the George Floyd family. We appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us on NewsNation.
Thank you.
And we will be closely following this story as we await a verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Stay right here on NewsNation and NewsNation Prime, or you can download our NewsNation Now app for up-to-the-minute coverage.